You want to know my favoriteest thing in the whole wide world? Semantics. The Yakuza series, being based in and originating from Japan, faces an inherent barrier when brought to any other country in the world, that being the ever-present and infuriating world of language. Thus, it requires a very dedicated and thorough hand, or preferably hands, to make sure that it reaches its ultimate destination in a comprehensible and enjoyable state. And I specify both because a purely literal translation of the words themselves will inevitably end up confusing or distressing international audiences. You can end up with awkward situations like Mitsuo and Riona in Yakuza 3. Not the racism part, but the incest part. Incest in quotes. Japan and the US have vastly different views on the relationships between foster siblings, not to mention the entire world between them having their own views on it. For most, I imagine that this was barely even a passing thought regarding these two, mostly because it's a one-sided puppy love that's part of a story about acceptance rather than actual romance. You want to see what this same situation looks like, but on a nuclear disaster level? To any Street Fighter fans in the audience, how's Alex doing these days? Anyway, you've read the title, so you know what the actual subject of this video is. Realistically, said subject is also a passing thought for most fans, but we must consider two things. 1. I am insane. 2. The worst offenders I'm going to discuss change the context of their words and scenarios so drastically that I've accidentally been hating on the game a little harder than I ought to have been for years now. Yes, I'm serious. Also, side note, I'm nowhere near a professional translator, I don't know if you could tell. I've got Google and a dream on my side here, but I'm also doing as much as I can to make sure what I've got is at least somewhat accurate. So, as always, feel free to yell at me in the comments because I got something wrong and am in fact a fallible human being. Oh, actually, one last note. Supple already has a wonderful little video going over the insanity that is Kiryu's dragon style, so if you want to find out what that style has been called since the inception of playable styles, feel free to go check that video out. His is less about the translation aspect of it, though he does also go into detail about what it's been called in Japanese, so you'll still get your fill of what you're getting here, there. And now, with everything else out of the way, let's begin with the very first game to contain a formal style system in the first place. Ishin. Kenzen technically had styles first, but it doesn't have an official English translation, so there's nothing for me to get pissed off at, which means I'm omitting it from the video. Ishin has 4 styles in it, one for bare-handed combat, Kakuto, one for the katana, Ito, one for the pistol, Tanju, and one for both weapons together, Ranbu. The remake localizes these styles as Brawler, Swordsman, Gunman, and Wild Dancer, respectively, and these are suitable names. A more literal translation for these would be hand-to-hand, single sword, short gun, and the Wild Dance. Now, you could get into the weeds with the localized titles being a description of Ryoma himself rather than descriptions of the weapons he uses in each style, but I don't think that's worth making too much of a fuss over. These are basically perfect for what they are, save for Brawler being so overused with the series where it is now, even though it actually fits better here than it does in its other iterations. In fact, before I spoil too much about that subject, let's move on to where things get dumb. Every single style going forward has a localized name that you're probably super familiar with. Ishin also does, but no one is familiar with those ones because no one played Ishin Kiwame. Now it's time to forget those names. I need everyone to get out your Street Fighter brains because, much like the trio of Claw, Boxer, and Dictator, we're going to be referring to styles by pseudonyms going forward. Most often I'll be referring to them by color. For example, this isn't Brawler style, this is Kiryu's blue style in Yakuza 0. And this isn't Snake, it's Yagami's green style in Lost Judgment. Disregard the names you've known them by for years, they're pretty colors now. Yakuza 0 would double the style count of Ishin, with both characters having access to 4 styles each. That said, one of these styles is the same across both, and I'm gonna confidently guess it's Densetsu, meaning legend, which is how it's localized. I'm gonna guess that because I am not delaying this video so I could finish either of the side stories in my Japanese copy of Yakuza 0 for the PS3. If you have the patience to find footage of the style selection screen on the pause menu for Yakuza 0 in Japanese, good for you. More power to you, the world is your oyster. Me personally, I'm gonna settle for this because I still retain some of my sense of restraint.
Frankly, I'm ashamed.
Now let's start out on something simple. Both Pink styles and Majima's Yellow style are written out in katakana because they're English loanwords. Kiryu's Pink style is Rashu, while Majima's Pink style is Dansa, and his Yellow style is Suraga. Of course, these can easily be translated as Rush, Dancer, and Slugger. We got 2/3 of that, with the localization team only choosing to retranslate Dancer as Breaker. Lord knows why they decided to ditch a more direct translation when we already knew exactly what English word this style was being referred to as, but thankfully this is more annoying than confusing. And it still gets the intended point across, so again, it's not worth getting into the weeds over. Now with the easy ones out of the way, it's time to talk about kanji. Kanji, being imported symbols from the Chinese language to Japanese, which have their own native Chinese pronunciation, as well as being symbols that represent things and concepts rather than a set of consonants and vowels with meaning assigned to collections of them, are not easy to translate into English. So not only are we working with potentially different pronunciations of the symbols themselves, they also have distinct meanings already assigned to them, more comparable to hieroglyphs than words and letters. And even then, those symbols can mean different things depending on the other kanji or even hiragana or katakana which are attached to them, as well as the greater context of the sentence that those words are found in. To give a relatively simple example, Wild Dancer, Ranbu, as I said earlier. It's written with two distinct kanji characters, Ran and Bu. Ran meaning riot, confusion, disruption, chaos, things of that nature. This can be seen in a word such as Hanran, which means insurrection or rebellion. Bu, on the other hand, means dance, both in the literal act of dancing, but also in the meaning of a performance. The kanji for Bu can be found in the word kabuki, meaning a traditional Japanese style of theater. So, putting Ran and Bu together gives us a word which means, as said before, a wild or boisterous dance. This both refers to the literal act of Ryoma's arms and legs twirling about as he defeats his enemies, but it can also refer to the performance of the style in a more general sense, the chaotic and violent clash of old and new means of combat, striking out against an antiquated Japan as the face of the Meiji Restoration attempts to drag the nation kicking and screaming into the 20th century. Language is so fucking cool, isn't it? Anyway, back to Yakuza 0. Kiryu's yellow style is Kowashiya, containing the kanji Kowa, the hiragana Shi, and the kanji Ya. Kowa means destruction or demolition, and it can be used in words to mean the act of destroying something or the concept of destruction itself. Ya, on the other hand, can refer to locations and structures, but in this instance, it turns the Kowa into a thing that is being dealt out by Kiryu. Therefore, one could roughly translate this style as destroyer or dealer of destruction. Google defaults to the destroyer, which is extra fitting considering that this style is something of a role that Kiryu is taking up, more than a direct descriptor of his actions or fighting style. If I'm being honest, I think translating it as beast undersells what exactly the name Kowashiya means, especially seeing that this style is named in a manner more similar to Wild Dance than the other Ishin styles, which simply describe the tools that Ryoma uses to pummel his enemies. This is especially true when you consider that Kiryu learns this style from Miss Tatsu, a debt collector, who is very much a dealer in destruction. If you want to combine all of this under one umbrella, it would certainly take some work, but I could think of a name like Enforcer or Destroyer, again, working pretty well for it. Yeah, it would take some finagling, but I also kind of like the idea of playing on the terms Repo Man and Demo Man, considering that this version of collecting a debt is enacted through wanton violence and destruction. This is the kind of stuff that a localization should work to convey. Not just the literal words, but the ideas behind them, and the context behind those words that can suddenly make one thing mean something completely different. This style isn't Kiryu going beast mode, at least it's not just that. It's Kiryu embodying the spirit of a paid strongman who just showed up on your doorstep, fully aware that you don't have enough to pay this month's interest, and prepared to show you just how deadly of a mistake that can be. This is the kind of thing I love about learning new languages. You get to see all these different ways of looking at words and ideas, and if you're translating, you get to come up with ways to approximate those words and ideas for an entirely different culture. I just wish the localization team for Yakuza 0 had that same goal in mind for this, because by that metric, Beast style is a severe letdown. All of that said, though, it's about time to move on. There's one more style which uses kanji for its name, Majima's blue style, Kenkashi, with each syllable being its own kanji. This one is a little more abstract in its name. Both ken and ka on their own mean noise and boisterousness. Really common word, it keeps coming up in these names. Thankfully, the first two kanji combine to form kenka, which is a general term for brawls and arguments, any sort of quarrel, it seems. Shi, on the other hand, refers to an expert or model in some kind of field, women winning as usual, which when combined with kenka can roughly translate to a master of fighting. When combined with Majima's tactics in this style, blinding enemies, observing the battlefield to see who has what weapon, being both super evasive and super cunning in how strikes are evaded and landed, we can extrapolate from Kenkashi the idea that Majima is an expert in street fighting. The kind of expert who knows how to dodge any attack and use that opportunity to slink up behind the attacker and snap his neck. You know what word doesn't remotely suggest any of those things? Thug. And it's here that we move beyond surface level complaints to our first real problem. Thug style, as a name, suggests a style of fighting that's synonymous with the kinds of enemies you'll usually fight on the street in one of these games. It certainly doesn't suggest a pedigree in the field of fighting, which is exactly what Majima displays in this style. It doesn't work for that at all. If anything, I'd suggest translating this style as something like Scrapper to convey the dirty tactics Majima uses. Or even if you want to stay more basic, just something like Brawler would be more suitable. Although, talking of, let's get off this subject for now and wrap up the actual translation work. Kiryu's blue style, localized of course as Brawler, is actually another word written in katakana. I must have forgotten about that one. It's called chinpira. This is not a loanword from English, despite being in katakana, but if you've played these games for any amount of time, you probably know this word. It's a word that Kiryu often uses to describe random enemies who pick a fight with him. In fact, it even gets a loading screen privilege in Yakuza 6 with a lot of other Japanese words that get translated in that game for some reason. It's a word fundamental to the Yakuza series. And guess what? Kiryu was not calling young dudes who pick fights with him on the street a bunch of brawlers. Chinpira can mean punk, or ruffian, or perhaps thug.
Oh no!
So yeah, thug style is brawler style, and brawler style is thug style. I don't understand how a mistake like this is even possible, if I'm being honest, and it has to be a mistake. You cannot mistranslate a word as simple as chinpira. The kanji I get, there's a lot of complex meanings and context that you need to hope gets brought over in surrounding dialogue if you want to make it make sense. And if it doesn't, you're just kind of screwed unless you decide to retranslate all of those surrounding sentences to give that word a little more explanation at the cost of whatever the character is actually saying. But chinpira? Seriously? The localization team saw the word chinpira next to another word that Google Translate just calls having a fight. And they decided to very specifically use words that would work perfectly for the opposite blue style. This has to be a mistake. I refuse to accept this as a purposeful creative decision. And it's way too late to do any work correcting that mistake now. This is the most popular Yakuza game. It's been that way for nearly 10 years in the West. There's no way to disassociate the word brawler with Kiryu's blue style. It's just not possible. So we're stuck with this. And if I have to be burdened with this knowledge, so do you. Anyway, I need a buffer for this next bit to get between the Yakuza Zero and the other stuff. So, fun game. What do you guys think the agent style is called? You know, we all remember agent style. Very fun. What do you guys think? What do you think it's called? Time's up. It's called agent style. Man, you know, maybe some part of me was hoping that there was some kind of creativity put here that wasn't put in the style itself. But clearly Gaiden was not willing to give me that level of catharsis. So, the ending made me cry though, so I guess that makes it a good game. And now for the moment you've been waiting for. Judgment, or more specifically, Lost Judgment, and its styles. Thankfully, there won't be quite as much work that I need to do on the translation side of things because the issues here are not so simple as this word could be changed to fit better, or brawler style is thug style. No, the problems here are almost entirely surface level, technically, but they point to a much deeper issue with this localization team that I've had for years now. So here we go. Yagami has 3 main styles in Lost Judgment: blue, red, and green. In Japanese, these styles are respectively Enbu, Ishin, and Nagare. Here's an unrelated fun fact for all you animal lovers out there. The Japanese word for crane is suru. Wait a second. So yeah, Thanks to the lovely localization done by the Atlas team, led by Scott Strikert, aka my longtime mortal enemy, we didn't get a translation for the names of the styles in Judgment. We got what Atlas thought sounded cool. And what sounds more cool than the names of actual styles of Kung Fu, right? What could be the problem there? What issue could possibly arise from naming a martial art for another martial art that, oh, right, does not resemble it in the slightest? You remember how I once said Agent style was Muay Thai because Kiryu held his hands in a somewhat similar way? A team of professionals got paid to do that! And I realize I need to emphasize these differences because it's not just Crane. Tiger style Kung Fu only shares an aesthetic in the sense that it's a lot of hand strikes. And this snake style just straight up isn't Kung Fu, it's Aikido. And quite frankly, the idea of comparing one of the most artistic expressions of human form and athleticism to the living embodiment of the opposite of those things is insulting. For years, a big reason as to why I've held so much vitriol for Judgment is the fact that it doesn't seem to understand what Kung Fu is in the first place. And again, that wasn't RGG's fault! If these styles were actually called Crane, Tiger, and Snake in Japanese, then I would say it should have joined Yakuza 0 and 6 in being censored in China for the sheer disrespect to Kung Fu as an art form. As is, I can only wish the most painful stubbed toes and spilled coffees for Scott and the rest of his cronies that decided that they knew better than RGG's actual writers and designers. Granted, it's not hard to know better than RGG's writers in most instances, but you had to fuck it up in the worst way possible. So much of Judgment and Lost Judgment were translated with purposeful disregard for the source material. But this is so much worse than refusing to translate gorilla jokes because Scott didn't think they were funny. This is not what a localization should be. So now we're left with pretty blank slates for these style names. If they weren't named for Kung Fu, then what were they named for? Well, they're all words formed from kanji, so there's a lot of potential directions the team could have gone in. How about I show them what an actual localization effort looks like? As mentioned before, the blue style is Enbu. It's formed from two kanji, En meaning round or circular, and we've already discussed Bu earlier. Google translates this word as waltz, and we've immediately got such a better name for what this style does. In Lost Judgments especially, this style sacrifices power for speed and dexterity, and the image of dancing around your foes, throwing out pokes, and graceful spinning and leaping strikes is very well embodied in a name like Waltz. Simple and to the point. The red style, Ishin, is also made of two kanji, I meaning one, and Sen meaning flash or brandish. Now, this kanji is a little bit more difficult to get a combined meaning from, considering one of them is just one. The best I can manage is a single burst of light, which, hey, that's what this style is all about, right? Trading dexterity for speed and power while also being able to sacrifice that speed for the ability to charge up your attacks, the most iconic of which is literally a single brilliant flash of light. It's almost like the Flux Fissure was a clever interpretation of the style's namesake, and not some weird extra ability that Tiger-style Kung Fu users can all do, apparently. Now, we lose a bit of the cleverness with the green style, Nagare. It's only one kanji, which means flow. Suits the style well, sacrifices speed for power and dexterity, which is honestly quite impressive. Some other practitioners of Aikido have to sacrifice all of those things. Okay, that fills my Steven Seagal dissing quota for the day. Now, to make up for the lack of interesting things to discuss related to Nagare style, how about I throw in one more on top? Yagami's yellow DLC style is called Boxer in English, which you'd think is the simplest and most normal translation in the world, right? Well, obviously not. It's the final kanji we have to dissect, Kenny, made up of two symbols, Ken meaning fist and I being a different I from earlier, funny enough, this one meaning intimidate or majesty, as in being majestic. The simplest way to translate this would be something like fist power, but this E carries such a dignified connotation that it would be more fitting to replace power with a similarly lofty term. You know, something like fist might or fist prowess, something along those lines. So, that takes care of the most important and stupid and terrible translated style names. But before we wrap this up, how about I throw a little Kaito cherry on top? His styles are both written in katakana, but neither of them are loanwords. More interesting, these would be the first localized style names under the newest and current, at the time of this video, localization team for the Yakuza games. They would go on to create the translations for Ishin Kiwami that I started this video with, so it's quite fitting that we'd end up here. So, how did they do? Well, Kaito's orange style is kachikomi, a slang term for raid. Fitting enough name, considering one of the main points of the Kaito Files narrative is that Kaito abandoned his relationship to partake in a big Yakuza clash, and this being the style he's used since Judgment reinforces how stuck in this way of thinking he's been up to now. He's been defaulting to Yakuza mode ever since losing Mikiko, and it takes remembering her for him to unlock his second style, that being the purple powerhouse known as Teppen. Also written in katakana, this word means iron plate, although it apparently has a colloquial meaning of certain winner, which is why Google refuses to translate it as anything besides surefire hit. Aesthetically, this style fits better with the former definition, reflecting Kaito's inner strength that he was able to cultivate and call upon to protect Mikiko in her times of need. Seeing that they both semi-jokingly referred to him as her bodyguard, it's extra compelling and honestly pretty cute that this style would be so closely linked with her. Kaito Files and good writing, who could have guessed? Anyway, like I said earlier, what are the translations? Well, officially, these styles are translated as Bruiser and Tank, probably because the localization team saw that they were rehashes of the Yakuza Zero styles and just assigned some similar sounding words for them. Localization truly is an art form, and just like so much art in the modern day, it's dead. Goodbye, everyone! Special thanks, as always, goes out to the patrons, Jestby, Hashbear, Indolent Lard, Cohen, and Loki. And to anyone who wants to join, you can go over there and do that, because hopefully I'll be doing more short videos in the future. I hope that this one was good, and I hope you liked it, and I love you so much. And to everyone watching this video, thank you very much for doing that, and I hope that you all have a good day. Take care of yourself. Oh, by the way, guys, quick quiz. What do you think the pirate style was translated as?
Pirates.
What? Plural? Why would it be plural? What sense does that make?